NASCAR continues to test the next-gen car this week. Matt DiBenedetto gets clowned by a former sponsor, and Jake Paul is considering a NASCAR run. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. It's been a very interesting week of NASCAR news, to say the least. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. The off-season is not slowing down, it seems. We've got a lot to cover today. Let's begin with Jimmie Johnson's big announcement he made on Good Morning America this morning. That's right, the 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion announced today that he will compete full-time in the IndyCar Series in 2022. And yes, that includes the Indianapolis 500. Jimmie Johnson will attempt to qualify for the Indy 500 next May. Of course, this past season, Jimmie Johnson only ran the road and street courses on the IndyCar schedule, which means he still ran a near full-time schedule, but next year, he'll run all 17 races. Carvana sponsoring him for 16 of them, but now, most importantly, he's adding ovals to his schedule, which to me speaks volumes to IndyCar's recent safety improvements. A lot of people, of course, were a little skeptical, or at least concerned about the aero screen when it was first introduced, but if nothing else, they make the drivers more secure. I don't think Jimmie Johnson would be attempting to qualify for the Indy 500 next year without the aero screen or something like it. Obviously, this is a big deal for IndyCar. Jimmie Johnson's a world-class driver, a household name amongst motorsports fans. Adding his name to the Indy 500 entry list is going to add a ton of intrigue the week leading up, obviously with qualifying, bump day, and everything. Jimmie Johnson first has to make the race, of course. Qualifying for the Indy 500 is no easy feat. Always one of the most stressful afternoons in racing, but he's in a good enough Chip Ganassi-backed car that he'll have the equipment to get it done. It's just up to Jimmie Johnson to be mistake-free. I'll be curious to see what kind of pace he sets early on in the practice sessions and see where he may need to improve, but assuming Jimmie Johnson makes the race, which if I was a betting man, I'd say he probably will, how do you think Jimmie Johnson will perform in the Indianapolis 500? To me, I think he's either going to run top 10 or he's going to crash. The Indy 500 is a very treacherous race. Those cars are on the hairiest of edges. One slight wheel out of place or brief momentary lack of focus and you're backed up into the fence. There's no saving the car like you might be able to in NASCAR. We've seen NASCAR drivers like Kurt Busch in 2014 go over and run the Indy 500 without really any open wheel experience, and he finished 6th. So I think Jimmie Johnson absolutely could win the Indy 500. He certainly wouldn't be my pick. He wouldn't be one of my probably first 10 or 15 picks, but it isn't out of the question. So that will be something very interesting to watch come May. First and foremost, I hope he makes the show, but I'm sure many of you will be watching. I mean, many of you are probably going to watch anyways because it's the Indianapolis 500, but if you weren't already, I think people are certainly going to pay more attention to qualifying and practice than they did last year. Especially NASCAR fans I'm talking about with Jimmie Johnson's name on the entry list. Anyway, as I'm filming this, NASCAR's 2-day next-gen test at Charlotte Motor Speedway is underway. They'll be testing today, Wednesday. They'll take tomorrow off to analyze data, and then Friday they'll be back at it. This test was added kind of last minute after some concerns arose after last month's Charlotte test. And as we discussed last week, NASCAR is testing a couple higher horsepower rules packages today. Bozy Tatarovich, who's been covering the next-gen car in great detail really since the very beginning, explained very neatly on Twitter that, based on his understanding, there are really 3 variant rules packages that are being tested today at least. I'm not sure about Friday. The first, as he writes, includes 550 horsepower and a 7-inch spoiler. And he mentions there are some changes to the diffuser and underneath the car that have been discussed. That is the lower horsepower, higher downforce version that NASCAR originally said was going to run at all the intermediate tracks next year. The next 2 packages both include 670 horsepower, which is pretty close to what the Xfinity Series runs at every track, of course outside of super speedways. But this second package includes a shorter spoiler, 6-inch spoiler. Meanwhile, package 3 is using a 6-inch spoiler that is shifted to the right. I keep referring you guys back to this video that Josh Hamilton posted on Twitter last week of the next-gen car after, I believe, a wind tunnel test, and you can see how the spoiler is kind of extended over the right side of the car, presumably in an attempt to add some side force without actually messing with the symmetry of the body itself. So I think something like that is what Bozy is saying they will test this week. He also mentions they'll have a shark fin and deck fin on the back of the car as well to try and help with balance and side force. So you see 3 different packages. 2 of them that are being tested this week feature higher horsepower. Higher than last year, at least, on these types of tracks. Closer to what the Xfinity Series runs, which last year was consistently the best show in NASCAR. Reasons to be optimistic, as I've said all along, horsepower, spoiler height, that's not everything. These cars are so different, built so differently from the ground up. The balance is way different. We can't zero in on the horsepower determine spoiler numbers to predict what the racing will look like. Like, we can get an idea. Obviously, the more horsepower, the better chance you'll have to spend some time off the throttle. Bigger the rear spoiler, we know will likely punch a larger hole in the air that can affect drivers' ability to run up behind each other. Like, there are certainly things we can predict based on those numbers, but those aren't the only thing. I think that's always important to note. Already today, as of the time I'm recording this, we saw Ricky Stenhouse Jr. spin out in traffic with the 550 horsepower package, I believe. And then apparently testing the 670 package, Tyler Reddick spun out and plowed into the water barrels or sand barrels, whatever's in them this time, at the entrance of pit road. Richard Childress Racing cannot catch a break with these tests. That's back-to-back tests now. They have severely damaged one of their next gen cars. But anyway, I just wanted to share that information with y'all. We'll talk more about the next gen and how these tests go. We'll talk some tomorrow maybe about it, but of course we'll talk more after Friday's test as well. Once the entire test is complete, we hear what some drivers maybe have to say. For what it's worth, NASCAR is streaming the tests on their YouTube channel as they have for previous tests. So if you're interested in just having that on in the background while you work, I know that's what I'll have on in the background while I'm editing, be sure to check that out on NASCAR's YouTube channel. One last thing worth noting though is that the temperatures in Charlotte are once again very cold. I believe they were testing the 550 package today in like mid 40s degree weather. Today in the afternoon it'll hit like the mid to high 50s, so still colder than pretty much every race will likely be run next year. Colder typically means more grip, which is going to maybe affect the way the aero package works in these tests, as opposed to how it's actually going to work next year in warmer temperatures. So just something to keep in mind. Anyway, now let's talk about some silly stuff. And no, I'm not talking about silly season. Well, I guess I kind of am, but really just some goofy, ridiculous, typical NASCAR off-season absurdity, if you will. This headline has been going around the last couple days, so I figured I'd at least comment on it. Jake Paul reportedly considered competing in NASCAR. Now, I actually found what I believe to be the original clip where he said this. It was in an interview with Gareth A. Davies.
Swimming, why not?
Why not? I've wondered, what do I do after boxing? I've thought about the NFL, I've thought about NASCAR, but now that you're bringing up swimming,
Now, who is Jake Paul? Some of you older viewers may be asking, and by older I mean like 22 and older. Like, I'm 24 and I barely know who Jake Paul is. Jake Paul originally I believe was a YouTuber, maybe he was a Vine star or something, but he's a social media sensation. He's got 20 million subscribers on YouTube, 17 million followers on Instagram, 15 million on TikTok, and recently, the last few years, he's turned to boxing. He's become a sort of prize fighter, if you will, raking in the pay-per-view money. So in that interview, he's discussing what he might do after boxing, and he mentions a couple different things. He kind of just mentions NASCAR in passing. I did find this tweet, which is nearly 7 years old, where he tweeted, "I should be a professional race car driver." Maybe he's been considering this for quite a while. All right, I'll stop. I'll move on. I'll stop humoring this because he's not racing in NASCAR. Unlike boxing, where if you step into the ring, the only person's health you're risking is your own. In NASCAR, if you go out onto the racetrack behind the wheel of a high-powered, heavy metal race car, you're risking not only your own health, but the health and safety of everyone else on the racetrack and perhaps even in the grandstands. So no, Jake Paul is not going to race in NASCAR, not in the Truck, Xfinity, or certainly not the Cup Series, unless he's raced in a lower local level series at some point or another. Like, he's gonna have to get behind the wheel of a smaller car in front of a small crowd at a small racetrack and do that many, many times before I think any NASCAR team, even a K&N or an ARCA West or East team even, would consider putting him behind the wheel of a ride. Like, I don't know exactly what the approvals look like in ARCA, but I know NASCAR, at least as of now, would absolutely not approve him to race in any of their top 3 series. I don't care how much funding he may have, he's not driving a race car in competition. I could see him, doing like a Richard Petty driving experience, like test lap for a video like that. I could absolutely see that. I mean, I could go do that if I wanted to, but he's not racing in NASCAR competition. I just wanted to throw that out there because that headline's been making the rounds this week. Just a good goofy headline to take some of the edge off this week. Last thing I want to talk about though, and this one I don't really know what to make of it, but last night or yesterday, I noticed a tweet. I saw this tweet making the rounds on Twitter from, I guess, one of or the official Keen Parts Twitter accounts. I don't exactly know who's running it over there, but Keen Parts is a company that's sponsored several NASCAR teams in recent years. You'll recognize some of their paint teams or recognize their logo, of course. And well, here's what they tweeted. Tom, I don't know who Tom is, he must work for Keen Parts, got a call today from a guy working to get Matt DiBenedetto's sponsorship. Tons of laughing, crying emojis, wanting us to sponsor him, and more laughing, crying emojis. Oh gosh, now not only does Matt DiBenedetto not have a ride yet for 2022, but now potential sponsors are straight up making fun of him on Twitter. I don't mean to laugh. I don't think Matt DiBenedetto's a bad guy. I think he's made some maybe poor judgment decisions with how he presents himself on social media in recent months. Going all the way back to that 10-minute video he posted when the Wood brothers said he wasn't coming back to the team next year. But I don't know if the guy deserves this. Now, okay, that Twitter account then clarified that it wasn't Matt DiBenedetto who called. It was somebody, I guess, who works with or represents Matt. And again, take all of this with a grain of salt, but it certainly doesn't sound like Matt DiBenedetto is very close to landing the sponsorship required to land a decent NASCAR ride next season. Now you may wonder, why would a sponsor publicly clown Matt DiBenedetto like this? Why would they not just respectfully say no thanks and then let it be done in private? Well, the thing is, Keen Parts has sponsored Matt DiBenedetto in the Cup Series before, back when DiBenedetto drove the 32 for Go Fast. They were on that car for a good number of races, and if you go back in time a little bit, remember late in the 2018 season, Matt DiBenedetto announced he was leaving the team, he was leaving Go Fast. He didn't have a ride lined up for 2019, but he was betting on himself. He would often say quite openly, quite publicly, that he didn't think Go Fast cars had the speed or the funding, quite frankly, to get him where he believes he could get to. He believed he was capable of winning races in a better ride, and he didn't think Go Fast was capable of getting him there. Which is absolutely true. Go Fast was maybe a tiny step above a Rick Ware car most of its tenure. But I can also understand how a team like Go Fast and one of their major sponsors like Keen Parts may not be too happy with their driver, their spokesperson, going out and being so brutally honest with the media and the public. I don't know, I guess everyone needs to have a little thicker skin, but at the same time, I don't know what was said in private. Maybe DiBenedetto, Go Fast, Keen Parts, maybe some of them had further disagreements behind the scene, but either way, Keen Parts quite literally laughing Matt DiBenedetto out of the room on social media is not where I thought this offseason was going. I don't know what it is about old Go Fast drivers, like Corey LaJoie would get himself in some trouble with this as well. You know, he had that podcast, Sunday Money. He'd go on there pretty much every week and just explain honestly why he ran 30th. Like, oh, the car's not that good. Broke a motor, broke a fuel pump, broke whatever. And I know for a fact he was told behind the scenes, probably by the team or from some of the sponsors, like probably Keen Parts, to tone some of that back a little bit. Quit bad-mouthing the team publicly so much. Like, the honesty is welcome behind the scenes, trying to actually improve the program, but publicly, sometimes that honesty, I think, rubs people the wrong way, especially people like Keen Parts who are footing much of the bill. Even though maybe they're not spending what sponsors at Hendrick or Joe Gibbs are spending, they're still spending a lot of money to support that team and support DiBenedetto's career, Corey LaJoie's career. So I understand where the sponsor is coming from. It sounds like they and Matt DiBenedetto's relationship, if it wasn't fried already, it certainly is destroyed now. I know one of the most frequent questions I still get on these videos is, Eric, have you heard anything about Matt DiBenedetto? Where is he going next year? Does he have are there any leads? And I think this tweet kind of sums it up. I don't think there are any leads. He might have some funding here or there, but not enough to warrant a full-time ride. I mean, if we look at the Cup Series, there are only, I think, 2 or 3 charter teams who haven't announced drivers for next season, and they're, you know, the Rick Ware cars, and I think Spire's going to have a second charter, so they might have another full-time driver. So DiBenedetto could maybe land with one of those teams, but I wouldn't bet on it at this point. Matt DiBenedetto, from a purely driving talent standpoint, he is good enough to race in the Cup Series, without question. I know I've been a little hard on him for missing the playoffs last year and for still being winless 2 years after driving for the Wood brothers. I don't think he's fantastic by any means, but there are absolutely worse drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series than Matt DiBenedetto right now. I mean, the guy that is replacing him next year, Harrison Burton, he's not as good as Matt DiBenedetto. Like, he's a lot younger, a lot less experienced. I think he has the potential to be better than Matt DiBenedetto, maybe a few years down the line, but right now, and at least for the next couple of years, no, Matt DiBenedetto is absolutely a better driver than Harrison Burton. But as we talk about in this show time and time again, you know, NASCAR drivers are weighed against 2 factors. How talented are you, and how much funding do you bring, or how sellable are you, how marketable are you? Matt DiBenedetto's marketability has dropped a bit, and his talent, I think, is bleeding since, you know, his missing the playoffs with the Wood brothers, not a great look, even with all the other outlying circumstances. So that combination typically does not bode well for a NASCAR driver's career. That is just the truth of it at this point. I still think there's a very good chance he will race somewhere next year in some series, trucks, Xfinity Cup, part-time, maybe looking more likely than full-time, but I will be surprised if nobody takes a chance on Matt DiBenedetto. Someone has to. I mean, he did make the playoffs in 2020 in a pandemic year with no practice. Someone has to take a chance on him, even if it's not a competitive ride. I hope Matt DiBenedetto is not completely done, completely flamed out of NASCAR entirely. I'd like to see him work to rebuild his image, rebuild his stock, if you will. I think that would be an interesting journey to watch over the next couple of years. But there you have it. That's the latest news. Again, later this week, we'll talk about the next gen test in a bit more detail. But for now, that is going to do it. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. As always, a big thank you to my awesome Patreon supporters. I couldn't do this show without your tremendous support all year long. I greatly appreciate it. Be sure to leave a comment down below. I always read the comments. I'll see y'all in the next episode. Y'all have a great rest of your Wednesday.